we are recording this session. And you'll see there that there is a note that the session has started. So thank you very much for that opening poem, and thank you very much for joining us for today's session. So maybe just to offer a brief introduction, today's session will be an introduction to integrated area-based interventions to prevent crime and violence and to increase safety. In today's session, we'll discuss some of the key resources and introduce an exciting new project, which is a partnership between GIZ's Inclusive Violence and Crime Prevention Program, Violence Prevention through Urban Upgrading, and the Isandla Institute. My name is Inga Harbour, and I am I'm the learning convener for Isandla Institute, and I'll hand over to my colleagues and fellow panelists to introduce themselves. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah. I'm the project manager with BPUU.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me clearly. My name is Thomas Hellman, and I'm part of the GIZ Violence and Crime Prevention Program.
Hi, everybody. My name is Gianna. I'm the project lead, and I'm also research and project support at BPUU.
Thank you, colleagues. So just to run through some brief housekeeping for today's session, if you have any questions that you would like to share with the panelists, I'll ask you to please use the Q&A function that's available on Zoom. Otherwise, if there's anything you'd like to share with the whole group, if you could please put it into the chat, and we'll try also to respond if there's any questions asking for details with access to resources or anything like that. Just also to let you know that in today's session, we'll be using Menti as a way to kind of increase participation in the session. So if you would like to, on your screen, open Menti, MENTI.com, and I'll share the access code for today. So as I said, if you could please log on to www.menti.com and use the access code 5889373. My colleague will also put that access code into the chat. Okay, and we're going to move across to the Menti screen. So you can see here, our first question for today's session is, how do you in your work see the impacts, or how do you think that COVID-19 has increased risk factors for violence and crime? You have an opportunity there to go to this Menti site, use the access code, and send us some words that describe where you're seeing this impact. So we can see there some responses. Income insecurity, psychological stress, isolation, gender-based violence, an increase in domestic violence coming out as a common response, financial strain, being locked down with abusers, hunger, unemployment, Psychological stress, again, coming out quite strongly. Frustration. Yeah. So psychological stress, domestic violence coming out quite strongly from across the participants. Unemployment as well. We're going to move on to the next one. And if you could give us some responses on how you think that COVID-19 has affected violence and crime prevention interventions. So where have you seen the impact of COVID-19 on violence and crime prevention interventions? So again, for those of you who are only just joining us, if you can please log on to www.menti.com and use the access code 5889373. Okay, so we have a first response, thank you. So speaking about hampered public participation or community consultation, especially in communities that don't have access to data, fewer resources directed to crime prevention during lockdown. Again, resource constraints coming up, reduced budget for intervention, interaction between program implementers and communities reduced. Social distancing has made it difficult to intervene. There's been a huge influx of gender-based violence cases due to close, I think it must be close living. That lockdown has restricted the implementation of existing interventions. So yeah, thank you very much for your responses on that. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Gianna, who will take us through an introduction of what integrated area-based violence prevention intervention is.
Thanks so much, Inga. And can you hear me okay? Can I have a thumbs up from Inga? Just want to make sure my microphone's working. Okay, cool. Now we're all good. Great. Yeah, so Inga, I'm hoping you'll pull up the PowerPoint, but I'd just like to explain a little bit about area-based violence and crime prevention. So essentially, this work is based on a lot of different models of violence and crime, but one that we really focus on when we're doing integrated and area-based violence prevention work is Galton's theory of violence. So that's basically, you'll see when the screen comes up, I know it's not showing at the moment, but you'll see a triangle, and the triangle shows how we can see direct violence, and then there's also some kinds of visible and invisible violence. So direct violence might be something like someone hitting someone, right? Interpersonal violence, or perhaps even military violence. Usually that's visible. But there's also what we might say are invisible kinds of violence. So structures, institutions that enact violence upon people. And then also cultural violence, which is more sort of features of our society that maybe make people feel more afraid, or make people less safe based on, for example, what their identity may be. So you know, xenophobic sentiments might be considered a form of violence against someone's culture. So if you can go to the next slide for me, one of the ways that's really important to think about this within South Africa is apartheid's legacy. So there was direct or personal violence during apartheid, and even now we can see, you know, apartheid's legacy in acts of violence and crime that are physical. But we can also see it in structural violence. We have very spatially unequal and socially and economically unequal societies. It's a form of violence when it takes someone 3 hours to get to work because they live far from, you know, the city center, and, you know, perhaps their entire racial group lives far from the city center, and that was by design. And then cultural or symbolic violence, maybe fear. So maybe someone from the LGBTQ community that fears revealing their true identity and really flourishing as a person because they're experiencing cultural violence. If you can go to the next slide for me, Inga. So one thing that we're basically doing within the laboratory pathway of this project is looking at various violence and crime prevention strategies that combat direct cultural and structural violence. So for example, situational crime prevention is more about focusing on direct violence. So creating spaces that are safer, creating spaces that have crime prevention through environmental design. So it's about the architecture, better lighting. Social crime prevention is more about rehabilitating offenders and victims, and also people who may become victims or may become offenders. So things like local economic development would be a form of social crime prevention. And then institutional crime prevention is about fixing power relations. So improving relationships between perhaps people in power and community members, or perhaps people within a community, social relations that link into political structures, those kinds of things. If you can go to the next slide. Basically, the way that we enact all of these strategies all together is about negotiating with all partners in an area. And that's really where the area-based aspect comes in. So it's about common values in an area, a common culture and pride in the area, and pulling together all of the partners who need to be involved in violence prevention in one place. And yeah, I think I'm going to oh, it's not, I'm handing over to myself for the next section. So one of the things that I would like to talk about in the time that I have is to explain what resources are going to be used within the laboratory pathway, and that what resources are informing generally this project on upscaling integrated and area-based violence prevention interventions. So I think we can go to the next slide. So beginning last year and into this year, VPUU and GIZ embarked on a knowledge management project that looked at violence prevention across South Africa within the South African German Development Cooperation. And so essentially, sites, specifically 4 different groups were looked at. So we looked at sites within my organization, VPUU, in Cape Town. And then we also looked at sites in Port Elizabeth, worked on in partnership with the South African German Development Cooperation and Nelson Mandela Bay Development Agency. Sorry, got the name wrong there for a sec. And then also the city of Tshwane, which is Pretoria, for those of you who may not know, and then several sites across the country that had been receiving technical support from the GIZ Violence and Crime Prevention Program. And that included youth organizations and development organizations, even municipalities. And what we did were a series of small exchanges and 2 big workshops, as well as several interviews with people from all of the sites. And the workshops included others from other sites as well, from different municipalities, different provincial government departments and national government departments. And basically the big question was, during the South African German Development Cooperation, what has everyone learned about violence prevention? Or at least so far. So you can go to the next slide. One thing that framed these conversations was the 2016 white paper on safety and security. So we basically used the 6 themes as a frame for how we understood the different violence prevention work that everyone had been working on. And you can go to the next slide again. And the result was a guide to designing integrated violence prevention interventions. Not meant to be a recipe book. It's not a checklist. It's a set of guidelines based on what all of these absolutely brilliant people, honestly, I was so honored to meet them, all of these brilliant people working on violence prevention across South Africa, what they've learned throughout their experiences in, and we kind of grouped it into 6 different topics, which you see here. So lots of lessons came forward about building relationships among all the different stakeholders, which is really important in an area-based approach. About integrating budgets successfully, so working in one area and realizing you've got all these different budgets coming at you, and how to implement effectively and understand the different cycles happening at once. Co-designing integration, setting a strong foundation, managing external risks, those things out of our control, fostering active citizenry, so meaningful community participation, and sharing knowledge, not just monitoring and evaluation, but also learning, reflection, and documenting, and sharing that publicly so that these projects can be upscaled. So based on these 6 topics, I'd like to ask you guys to participate in a Mentimeter. So you can go back to the Mentimeter presentation, and there's a question there about which of those topics you are most interested in. So I'll wait for everyone to pull up their responses. No responses yet. Okay, terrific. I'm seeing fostering active citizenry really leading, taking the lead. It's like a race. We've got 40 attendees, so I'll give a little more time. Maybe 2 more minutes. No, less than 2 minutes, sorry. I think probably 30 seconds is long enough. Okay. Great. I think then thanks everyone for your responses, and for those of you who are new to Mentimeter, for learning a new tool. So what I'd like to then share, since the most popular one is fostering active citizenry, just briefly, a little bit of a deep dive into what that one is particularly about. So this booklet focused on sort of four main topics. So thinking about the context in which an intervention is happening, and context matters especially because there are local power dynamics, local social cohesion levels that one must consider when working in a community, thinking about the perceptions of non-local team members and how that may impact the work on the project. And then I would say probably my favorite topic within this booklet is about local capital investment. So in reality, it's how can the project boost local livelihoods? So one of the biggest ways to do this, one of the biggest kind of strategies is community delivery of services. So when the project has to hire someone, an external contractor, in order to implement some part of the project, trying as much as possible to use local individuals, local contractors to do the work, and hiring people to kind of, yes, to work on the project, but to take ownership and to give back to the community in a circular manner. Not give back, but ensure that the project is implemented in a circular manner within the community. We also talked about activating spaces for greater safety through basically people being present. And we talked about different ways to capacitate the community and community members, whether they're community leaders or youth being involved as volunteers, however it may be. We also looked at participatory planning. There are many different methodologies for planning projects, making spatial plans, making plans to work with the municipality, all of them in participatory ways. And so this booklet, Fostering Active Citizenry, is really about how can we make community participation in violence prevention as meaningful as possible. Okay, so that's the one deep dive. I'll show the link in just a moment after I go through these ones. So if you're interested in diving deep into that topic or any of the others, if you voted for another one, I really would encourage you to check out the booklets. The other resources that are available within the guide are a set of case studies on violence prevention. So those dive into each of the sites that we looked at or that we interviewed and conducted workshops with. We also had a poster of key concepts and an overview booklet that is actually available within each of the guides if you download the digital version. It's just separate for the print version. Thanks, Inga. And yeah, that's the link. So you can find the guide on Safer Spaces in the how-to section. And it's called A Guide to Designing Integrated Violence Prevention Interventions. And you can also find it by going to VCP's page on Safer Spaces or VPUU's page. Thank you. And I'm going to hand over to Thomas from GIZ VCP.
Thank you very much, Gianna. Once again, good morning again from my side. So my name is Thomas Hellman again from the GIZ Violence and Crime Prevention Program. It's really a pleasure to be here and to share with you a little bit more information on the Upscaling Area-Based Violence Prevention Interventions Initiative. As you might have followed through the presentation from our VPU colleague Gianna, the guides and the material that was developed over the past 2 years will really play a critical role in this project, and I think kind of like forms the basis also for this intervention. But where does this process and this intervention really comes from? So the GIZ Inclusive Violence and Crime Prevention Program from GIZ, where I work, is a partnership program agreed upon between the government of South Africa and Germany. And it seeks to contribute to the national development priority of creating a safer South Africa by addressing the root causes of violence and crime through promoting integrated, holistic, and developmental prevention approaches. As you can see here, please, you can go back once more, Inga. The overall objective of the program now in this commission is to improve the framework conditions for the effective implementation of our South Africa's national overarching policy on violence and crime prevention, the white paper on safety and security. And this is done through those 4 areas that you can see in the presentation here. In that circle, through our government partners on national, provincial, and at local level, in all 3 spheres of government, as well as with the cooperation with the selection of civil society sectors. Now, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the German Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development approved additional funding to the VCP program to respond really to the negative social and economic impacts of the pandemic, which might actually further also amplify the risk factors for violence and crime, especially in our densely populated and other vulnerable areas. So it's for that reason really that the Upscaling Area-Based Violence Prevention Interventions Initiative, for what we're still seeking a really decent and a name that is really nicely memorable as well, to help build and promote community resilience to the shocks caused by the crisis and to contribute to enhanced collaboration between government and civil society sector. Inga, you can go to the next slide. So the initiative is really, I would say, a stepping stone for the coming 9 months to enhance implementation of key area-based violence prevention tools that have been developed, as you saw by Gianna's presentation, and more and others, to disseminate and assist institutionalizing this knowledge within government and the civil society sector to, as you can see, to mobilize local violence prevention interventions thinking, but also to develop, to advocate, and to support relevant government policies and programs through further exchange, to peer learning, and also looking forward to a knowledge hub which will be placed on Safer Spaces with products and the discussions around these 9 months project. You can go to the next slide. The initiative is, as you see here, comprised by two different pathways. The one pathway is the laboratory pathway, which is guided and led by the Violence Prevention Through Urban Upgrading NPC, and the learning network, which is guided and led through the Isandla Institute. And what is really important, please go to the next slide, is to understand that those two, I hope you can see it, it's quite small, but what's really important is that the two pathways, they are complementing each other, the learning network and the laboratory pathway, towards an institutionalization pathway, which you can see here in the middle, with an overall long-term goal to try and with the aim to integrate effective area-based violence and crime prevention approaches into the development and management of vulnerable urban communities, and that national and provincial governments assist in providing sustained policy and implementation support. There is, as you can see here, short, medium, and long-term goals that are aimed and that we are striving towards within our theory of change within the project. Next slide, please. So the initiative is really being guided by our national government partners in a steering committee, with COCTA being our chair, with Human Settlements, the National Treasury, especially the Neighborhood Development Partnership Program, as well as SALGA at a national level. And we are targeting and seeking assistance or targeted assistance from specific entities for specific occasions within those 9 months. And I go to that a little bit more in detail. Now, going a bit more detail on both of the two pathways that you saw in the theory of change. In the laboratory pathway, which is, as I said, supported by BPUU, is going to start focusing on empowering a group of NGOs and municipalities through a very intensive capacity building process in the coming, actually starting next week, in the coming months, on and focusing to empower a group of those NGOs and municipalities, and within that to support them towards a better understanding on area-based and violence prevention interventions. As you can see here, those are, as next to the circle, are the municipalities as well as CSOs that applied to be part of this project. All of those will be part of this municipal capacity, of this capacity building process in the coming weeks. And out of those 4, in which I think is actually also very good to know and very important to, and good to have, is that we have 4 different provinces that are actually part of that. In 4 of those, as you can see here, 11 municipalities, 4 will receive a situational analysis that will be done in those sites. And out of those 4, in 2 sites, there is going to be a support to a community development fund, which will provide further assistance and which will be guided by our BPUU colleagues much more in detail in the coming 9 months, which is then obviously towards the end of this process. Next slide, please. In the capacity building process in the coming weeks, participants will learn, as you can see here, in different sessions. They will learn more about the methodology on area-based interventions, on the role of stakeholders, on safety planning, and on the institutionalization of area-based violence prevention in municipal processes, just to highlight a few of those 7 sessions, as you can see here. Next slide. On the other side, and I think this is also very important, is the Isandla Institute leading and supporting the learning network pathway, which will provide the opportunity to participate in different learning network events, as you see here. The CSO learning network, for example, on the top, line, they will meet on a monthly basis, starting actually in October, also starting, well, now in November, beginning of November, but they will meet monthly, and out of those network events, there will be learning briefs that will be developed, which will also inform some of our multi-stakeholder learning events that are planned for the beginning of next year in February and May, who will then assist and seek to really develop practice briefs that will be disseminated further within government in the different institutions, as well as for the civil society sector. There will be video clips that will be developed, and a whole lot of other advocacy and awareness raising products that I think are going to be very, very valuable for learning further, and to look back also to our institutionalization pathway that we spoke to in the beginning. Now, I think you can go to the next slide. And to finish off of my short presentation, I really strongly believe that this initiative feeds and fits really nicely into this year's theme of the Urban Festival, towards empowering the civic, as it focuses on collaboration between civil society and local government in area-based interventions, and creates a space for the CSO sector to exchange, to learn and support, as well as to promote active citizenry. And I think with these words, I would like to hand back to my colleague Inga from the Isander Institute, who is going to take us through the Q&A session. I think we are really good in time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. So thank you very much to those of you who have already shared some questions. I know that Sarah has been posting some of the links to some of the resources. So thank you very much, Sarah, for that. So just a reminder to any participants, if you do have any questions, you are welcome to share them either through the Q&A function or through the chat. I see that we have got a question here relating to the lab. So I think, Gianna, if you don't mind answering, the question is, will the virtual workshops in the lab involve homework assignments?
Thanks, Inga. Just one sec, let me fix my microphone. Okay, I think we're okay now. Okay, so yes, the lab will involve homework assignments. Thanks for that question. So essentially though, I wouldn't consider them homework assignments that are extra busy work, right? It's all about on the job. So you might receive a homework assignment for a specific, say it was for the stakeholder engagement session, right? So your homework would be for the site team, not just an individual. So you'd work on it so if you're in the laboratory, I'm assuming, you would be working on it in your team of both a civil society organization and a municipal official. And the team would work on the one assignment together, and the work would be related to actually the work happening on that site. So perhaps, I'm not sure exactly what that homework assignment is going to be yet. The facilitator will have to assign it. But when they do, it could be something related to the stakeholder engagement work that's happening on that site. So it could be to share your plan for stakeholder engagement and think about what you would want to improve on with it. Or it could be some more intensive work around go and call specific community leaders and ask them about this specific question, right? So it's not extra work, it's work that would assist in area-based work already happening in that area. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Gianna. We have a second question. I think maybe Thomas, if you could answer it. So the question is, could you share a little bit more about safer spaces and what resources are available there?
Yeah, I can do that. I can try that. So if you look at the Safer Spaces platform, maybe you can actually also share your screen if that is possible, but I'm just going to talk to this. So this is really an online platform that is going to assist, and it's kind of like meant to be for practitioners in South Africa towards building up kind of like a momentum and building up the knowledge that is done within the South African space towards violence and crime prevention. And it's currently actually under a construction that will facilitate, and it is going to enable us to interact with this platform much more in the future. But you can see the different themes on violence and crime prevention in South Africa. For example, if you have a question about gender-based violence, or if you want to know more about how good parenting functions, or if you are interested in urban safety specific topics, you can learn more about it. There's an understanding of concepts and different themes in the platform. But what is also really important is that you can connect with different stakeholders from different spheres of government, but also from the civil society sector to understand projects from all over the province. You can actually get details on when you click on themes, or if you click on different provinces. There's really a resource hub that I think is quite extended for any violence and crime prevention, or maybe towards the actually NDP goal, towards building safer communities. And if you're looking for those resources, you may find them there. And I think at the end, it's something that we would really encourage and like, that we will have members, or you can be a membership of that, where you get newsletters and where you are able to connect to other participants and other stakeholders. And please, I am encouraging you to have a look at that and to be part of the Safer Spaces network in South Africa. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you, Thomas. I think this is another question for Gianna from one of our participants. The area-based work is incredibly important in South Africa. To what extent have you been able to connect with other NGOs doing interpersonal GBV and VAC interventions in this work?
Yeah, sure. So I think I can answer this question in relation to the laboratory. And I think within the Learning Network, obviously there's really big potential, and it is going to begin. Within the laboratory, several expressions of interest, several expressions of interest were received that included civil society organizations that are working on gender-based violence. And I believe also 2 that we're working with on violence against children. And so those were either applications directly from the civil society organization to get involved and to work on including the municipality in which they work as well. And others were an application put forward by the municipality recommending or putting forward specific CSOs to participate that were active on the site and willing to engage in learning about integrated and area-based violence prevention.
Thank you, Gianna. And just maybe to answer on behalf of the Learning Network, so as Thomas introduced, the focus of the Learning Network is really about building the civil society organization alliance, and yeah, organizations that are working within the kind of V space are definitely the organizations that we've targeted to try and include in the network. And I can't see who sent this question, but if anyone would like to be involved, it would be great if they could get in contact with us. So we have another question, which maybe I can direct to Thomas, just to say that it's really great to see the work supporting the implementation of the white paper. Is the work connected to DPME in any way? And given that DPME is supposed to be coordinating the white paper?
Yeah, yeah. Now I can actually also see the question, the Q&A section. That's good, so that I can see and be prepared for the questions. Yeah, thanks for that. And I would second that. That I think it's really great that we are obviously and of course trying to link the work that we are doing, as also our programs. Goal is towards implementation of the white paper. Currently, there is work that's being done and consulted on as a multi-stakeholder approach towards the development of the integrated crime and violence prevention strategy, the ICVPS, which is being coordinated by CSPS, by the Civilian Secretariat for Police Service, and that's and leading this multi-stakeholder approach towards really implementing the white paper implementation framework that was developed in 2016, where DPME is also supporting. At the moment, it's the CSPS that is coordinating that, but there are discussions, of course, also with DPME towards supporting that process. Thanks. But I would also like you, Inga, if you can, also to unmute Terence, our program manager from VCP, from GIZ VCP program, if he has anything to add on that. Thanks.
Sure. Terence should be able to speak. Terence, would you like to?
Yes, yeah, I can. Sorry, yes, no, Thomas, I think you, hi everyone, I'm Terence from GIZ. I'm the program manager of the Violence and Crime Prevention Program. Lovely to engage with you all this morning. I think, Thomas, you've said basically what I would have said as well. You've caught me a bit off guard, I must admit. Sorry, but yeah, I think that there's nothing more really to add on that matter to what you said.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you, Terence. We have another question, I think, Gianna, may be directed at you around some of the work of VPU. The question is, has there been any independent evaluation to show that these interventions reduce assault and homicide within a community?
Yeah, so as far as I'm aware, I began at working at VPU at the beginning of last year in 2019. So I don't remember exact dates and organizations, but you're more than welcome to contact me and I'll get them afterwards. But as far as I'm aware, an independent evaluation specifically of the Social Development Fund project was done, and then an evaluation on crime statistics across Khayelitsha in comparison to our flagship site in Harare. Within Khayelitsha, where we have an active precinct and a set of connected safe nodes. And that independent evaluation, which I think the year was 2013, but again, please don't quote me on it, showed that Harare had a 5% decrease in crime, although other statistics around Khayelitsha had increased. So we are seeing impact, and we're also hoping that we can do additional impact evaluations very soon. So yeah, thanks for that question.
Thank you, Gianna. Just there is a question here. I'm not quite sure. Someone's asked, could you name the municipality, please? I assume you're referring to the list of municipalities involved in the lab that we showed earlier. If you can just confirm that that's the case, I'll pull up that slide again. In the meantime, Thomas, could you please share a little bit more about how one becomes part of the project and who's eligible?
Okay, well, I must say, and I must admit that for the first, let's say for the first part, or for this first kind of like process or initial 9 months project, we have closed the expression of interest for the laboratory component. So the laboratory component and the 11 sites, or it's actually 11 municipalities that were sent in either by municipalities or by by civil society sector. They have been elected, and they will be participating starting next week, as I said, with the intensive capacity building process, then going into the situational analysis and the community development fund. But I think, and I'm not sure who asked the question, is that there is also the learning network component, which is really about peer-to-peer exchange amongst civil society sector and within government in the multi-stakeholder events that are going to be announced very widely on safer spaces as well. I said at some point that there's going to be a knowledge hub, and we will definitely make you aware if you check on the Safer Spaces website that you can participate in that. If you're a CSO and you're interested, you can also leave your details. We can leave our details, our emails. Maybe Inga, that's something, or Sarah, something that you could do so that you can write to us and we can give you more information on being part on the learning network. But I think, and I'm saying this very carefully, and Terence, don't quote me on that, but we're hoping and we are thinking that there might be a second phase of this project as VCP could be extended. And if we are going into a second phase of this project, then we will have another round of expressions of interest for other municipalities and for other CSOs to also be part of the laboratory pathway and to kind of like the further development of this program and process, as I said, towards the institutionalization of this. I hope I could answer your question. Thanks. Sips.
That's great. Thank you, Thomas. So we just had some feedback from the participant. So Gianna, you mentioned that there was a municipality that had put an expression of interest in integrating GBV and VAC programming into the lab, but you didn't mention which municipality. So would you please mention the name of that municipality?
Yeah, so there were two EOIs that specifically had a focus on gender-based violence, but I think I want to couch this in the fact that in an integrated approach, right, a special attention to violence against women, girls, and children, and other vulnerable groups as well should definitely be a key component of any area-based approach. So just because there are specific organizations or specific municipalities with a focus on that doesn't mean that that's not going to be a part of any site's work. And these are just specific organizations that put forward upfront that was a focus that they had, whereas others wanted to focus specifically on local economic development as perhaps a particular weak point or a strength that they wanted to enhance, right? So the two that put forward on gender-based violence and violence against children were the Nkwenkwezi Youth Development Sporting Foundation, which is a civil society organization in Goshwa municipality in the Eastern Cape, and the other was the city of Joburg. They also had a focus on gender-based violence. Yeah, and I think those are the main ones I can remember. But if you submitted an expression of interest and also mentioned GBV, I'm sorry that I forgot you.
Sorry. So we have just, I think, time for maybe one or two more questions. We have some questions in the chat. I think maybe Thomas, this is directed to you. Just looking at the capacity of SAPS and given their role in society, do you have a program for SAPS's, given the issues that people have had around the conduct of the South African police services? Are they included in any of the programs currently?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if I understand the question correctly, but this process, this upscaling integrated area-based violence prevention interventions initiative, as we are supporting area-based interventions in specific locations or in specific sites of a municipality, there is a component, obviously, of multi-stakeholder collaboration where subs, CPFs, obviously play a very critical role, and they are a part and puzzle of the solution to respond towards the maybe increased risk factors on violence due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But maybe on the other side, I think it is also worthwhile to mention that there is other support measures by the GIZ-BCP program together with its national partners here, especially with SALGA, where we embarked on a nationwide capacity building process for many municipalities, for 27 municipalities throughout the country, where the support to the community safety forums that I'm sure you are aware of, where SUBS has a support function together with the local municipality, of course, and where there are direct programs or processes of support. If you're talking about the conduct of the police and if there are programs, then I would like to refer you to Safer Spaces and maybe also have a look at the different practitioners. I am not aware of any at this stage. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Thomas, and thank you to everyone who submitted questions. I'm sorry we haven't been able to address them all, but we will try to address them in the write-up about today's session. There's another session starting in 5 minutes, so in the interest of time and giving everyone a chance to get a cup of tea, I'm going to hand over to Terence, please, to wrap up and close.
Okay, thanks so much, Inga. And this time I'm a little bit more prepared for speaking. First of all, I'd really like to thank everybody who's taken the time to join this call this morning and for your questions and inputs. It's great to see there is seemingly so much interest and enthusiasm in this very important project we're jointly launching. Then I'd also just like to thank the colleagues who've been responsible for organizing this bootcamp. So that would be Inga from Isandla Institute, Gianna and Sarah from VPUU, and of course my colleague Thomas from GIZ. I'd also like to thank the members of the steering committee. There is a broader steering committee of government departments and colleagues who are advising and guiding us on this intervention. And that would be DCOG, the Department of Cooperative Governance, who's the chair of the steering committee, Department of Human Settlements, National Treasury, SALGA, and of course the implementing partners, Isandla Institute and VPUU. And then a special big thank you to the municipalities and civil society organizations who've signed up to be part of what we hope will be a first round of others to come, but the first round of this intervention. I think it's going to take some commitment of time and effort and maybe even resources, but I'm sure through your participation, you're going to find it very worthwhile and useful. And we're looking forward to this being a kind of a test case of exactly how one can expand capacity for upscaling these proven approaches to area-based integrated violence prevention. So just as a last remark, I think as we've discussed, and we all know so well in South Africa, we have too many communities that are really suffering under a terrible burden of violence and crime. And with all the impacts this has on an individual psychological level, the social and economic impacts on these communities. So, and especially now with the COVID crisis, that's just, putting additional pressure on so many of the risk factors that these communities are already bearing the burden of. So it's really our hope that through this very collaborative multi-partner intervention, we will be able to bring some very tangible, very necessary support to these communities. And it's going to take dedication and hard work from all of us, but certainly as GIZ, as one of the supporting partners, we're very much behind this process and committed to it, and excited about what this can hold for the sector of violence prevention in South Africa. So once again, thank you all for your contributions, and good luck with the intervention, and hoping that this won't be the last time we in a forum like this. We'll hopefully have the chance to also give you updates and share how the project is going. Thanks so much.